Okay, welcome back to the Never Iron Anything Comics Review podcast. Now, as we enter our fourth year, this week you'll need to stiff up a lip, as we'll be taking a trip to Blighty. Joining me on this trip on a steam train is comics scholar and fan, Mr. Richard the Don Sheaf. How you doing, dude?
I'm all right. How are you, Tony?
Yeah, good. Yeah, and always here to pull the ACP bacon out of the proverbial fire is Tommy Guns to Curry. How you doing, Tom? You all right?
I'm good, thank you, Tony. How are you? How are you, my friends?
Thank you for asking. I'm very well. It's very kind.
Please, sir. How are you, Richard?
Yeah, I'm good. Enjoying reading intensively this book over the last couple of days. So yeah,
it's the only way to read it, I think, isn't it? Is that the? I'm going to say that.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. This is any sort of illusions to like reading an hour before this recording went out the window very quickly.
Good. Well, let's not muck about because we've got plenty to talk about with this one, I'm sure. Is Tom? Would you mind letting the listener know what the series is we're going to be discussing?
Yep. The series is Blake and Mortimer.
Thank you. And Rich, would you mind just letting the listener into which particular volume we're going to be talking about?
So we're going to read a volume that's called The Yellow M for Mother. So available from Cinebook, number 1 in their reprint series of, I think they're up to volume 30, or volume 30 is coming out this year. So volume 1 in their series, or volume 6 in an earlier series published in the late 1980s. But the Cinebook series, much easier to get hold of, slightly better translation, spelling,
okay.
All that sort of stuff. So as the collector of obscure Bond in the country, I'd really like a full set of the half a dozen volumes that came out in the late 80s, but it's proving quite hard work, if I'm honest. So
yeah, I mean, I don't think I saw this. We had a little chat about this beforehand, didn't we? But I was you reckon this came in at about 84, something like that? 86 was it, the original translation?
I've got volume of the original translations. I've got 3 of the 6, and so the Yellow M is volume 6, and it's got January 1988 written on it as the publication date.
Right.
So let's assume that the others came out in 86, 87, something like that. But like I say, they're very hard to come by now, partly because there are lots of volumes, Cinebook reprints, so that rather crowds out the market. But I don't think they can have been a huge success, which is the other reason. They're very hard to find. So
that's interesting.
But it's interesting that obviously this series with Cinebooks, and this one was 2007, is that right? Clearly it's doing quite well throughout to volume 30.
Yeah, and I think they've reprinted this particular one about 6 times, haven't they, as I understand it?
Okay, I mean, it's one of the classic volumes, but it's not. Although it's volume 1 as far as Cinebook are concerned. It's not volume 1 in the series.
Yeah.
When it was published in France, it's actually the 6th volume. So the original 1980s reprints published the first 6 volumes in the correct sort of chronological order. The Cinebook order jumps all over the place. The early volumes of Blake and Mortimer are all written and illustrated by Edgar Jacobs. But later volumes, other people get involved when he dies. But yeah, for Cinebook, I think they published the original volume 6, then volume 4, volume 5, and then they shoot up to volume 13.
Oh, I didn't realise that. That's quite a jump. Now, for those that might listen to this and fancy getting one, they are kind of one-off books, but there are character strands from other books, and we won't get totally into it, but you can enjoy this on its own. In fact, this is the only book in the series I've read, and I still enjoyed it. But there are other things that appeared. Is that right, Rich?
Yeah. It is slightly odd having this, which, like I say, is the 6th volume first, because there are things in it that you're supposed to go, aha,
yeah,
I recognise that.
Yes, very much so.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
The lead characters, it says something like about page 2 when you're introduced to the characters, like, here is our familiar figure, and you think, we've never seen this person before. He happens to be, Blake or Mortimer, but we've never seen him before.
Yeah.
So
I really like that because obviously this is one of the first one I picked up, and like reading it, I think I read about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of, and I'm going to steal a line from yourself, Tony. Like, you like watching Coronation Street, right? Like, it's if the story is confident in saying, "Hey, here's his character you met before," I'm going like, okay, well, this is an important character. I'll work it out as I go along. I didn't need the hand holding of his age sexification. You know what I mean? Like, I was quite happy just carrying on.
It's very 2001 internet, but yeah, I completely get what you mean there, mate. Yeah, no, totally. And I think part of it, I mean, I know, Rich, you are the premier UK comics detective, but it does sort of allow us to be like detectives, doesn't it, when we pick up a book that's almost mid-run, which is this confusingly is and isn't, I'm going to say. Yeah.
And it's definitely, if you, the initial volume 1, 2, and 3, which are a series called The Secret of the Swordfish, I would say artistically are not as good as this. So,
interesting.
I think this is for the publisher, it's a good place to start because, Jacobs is more confident in his art. So this is a better book in that sense. So,
yeah, I get that. And I wondered if that was the reason. I sort of scanned through some other things. And that is comparable to 2 other series we're going to compare it to a bit later as well, I think, where it sometimes takes artists to find their feet a little bit, doesn't it? With what they're doing. Rich, before we begin, I think possibly it might be best if you can just give us like a 2 or 3 line summary of what this book's about, if you wouldn't mind.
So this is, I was going to read off the back of the book here. So this is all about the incredible exploits of the Yellow Mark. Spectacular actions of this mysterious criminal are on the increase, holding up the Bank of England, robbing the Imperial Crown. No one seems able to stop him. He is so audacious that he lets the police know in advance where he will commit his crimes, each time ridiculing Scotland Yard a little more. The apparent ease with which he evades police schemes begins to worry the highest authorities of the country. Home Office asked Captain Francis Blake to solve the mystery and to discover the identity of the man who hides behind the yellow mask. The captain immediately takes as partner his old friend, Professor Philip Mortimer, whose scientific knowledge will be invaluable in solving this extremely complex enigma. Who hides behind the yellow mark?
Very good.
Here's a question. Who's the main character of this book?
It does jump about, as I understand it, as the series progresses. In some, it's Mortimer, and some it's Blake, isn't it? I think.
I think even here they've got pretty equal billing.
They what? Sorry, mate. What?
They've got pretty equal billing.
Yeah, I think in this one they have. Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one. Yeah, totally. So for those that don't know, this is set in a very sort of post-war. Well, for a book that's been created by a Belgian, it's London. Post-war London. It's very in line with the sort of ripping yarns that we know of the time, like Bulldog Drummond. The books by Erskine Childers, Riddle of the Sands, for example. John Buchan, I'm going to say, is another comparison. And also, in a strange sort of way, the more contemporary movies of Sherlock Holmes, when Basil Rathbone jumped forward to sort of wartime England, didn't he? You get a bit of that in there. So it's very sort of Watteau, stiff upper lip, glass of port kind of feeling to it. Am I right? Is that how you? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair, Frank. I mean, for me, it was there was a radio series called Dick Barton that used to be on Radio 4 pretty regularly. And that was one of the key. When I was reading this, I was like, it feels like Dick Barton, frankly. So no, absolutely,
totally, yeah. Good. So let's do our usual questions. So the ones that let's try and place ourselves in our own lifetime's continuity and reading habits. Is Rich, when did you first discover this series of books?
I'm going to say probably early to mid 2000s, probably when Cinebook started bringing them out, and I was sort of, I could see that Cinebook were publishing, a lot of stuff, and I wanted to get into some of it, and I think somebody, probably just gave me the first one, and I was like, yeah, okay, this sort of fits my, interest in all things sort of 1950s comics. I love those stories with RAF captains, people smoking pipe. You get the feeling that Dan Dare could be happening slightly off to one side in the story.
Yeah, that's how I envisage your home life. Just so we're clear, very similar to either of these two characters. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think I was saying earlier, back in the day, Sydney Books, they would go to shows and they'd sort of do 2 for 1, or friend, and he was going, and he just said, look, if they're doing 2 for 1, do you want me to get some? I was like, oh yeah, get me some. And then I went up to see him, and he lived in Edinburgh at the time, and he went, here you go, and he gave me like 12 volumes of Blake and Mortimer. And he sold me a load of other, really big chunky books, and I've never had, one of those sort of small rucksacks you can take on a plane that was absolutely bursting at the seams. And like the last person on this EasyJet flight, and I was like, I could hardly move because this rucksack was so heavy, and I was just like thinking, I'm going to get on this plane in a minute and have to casually just move everybody's rucksack from the overhead lockers.
Oh, that's the worst thing about ain't that bad about EasyJet, yeah.
So no, but luckily I found this space. I was like, oh, thank God, I can put the world's heaviest bag in there, and and so then I just probably just spent the time flying back from Edinburgh to London reading Blake and Mortimer books.
What about you, Tom?
So it was 2017,
right.
And the other podcast had just done the first European comics episode. So
okay.
So I think it was like episode 105, 107 maybe.
Oh wow, yeah.
I popped down to my local comic shop, which is Excelsior in Bristol, and I saw looking through this. They had like a rack of small press stuff, which included some cinebooks, and they had Blake and Mortimer there. I'll be honest with you, I went there looking for Valerian, but while they were ordering that in for me, I picked up like 1, 2, and 3 of this.
Oh, cool! Oh, nice work. Yeah.
That's how I saw it there. It looked interesting. It was I'd never heard of it before. Obviously I knew the other two big 2 BD books. But yeah, no, this was brand new to me, and I thought let's just give it a go.
That's interesting, and I was only spurred on to do it because I know you talked about it on a more maybe a couple of months ago on the ACP. You on the Awesome Comics podcast, you came on and chatted about it when we did a sort of post Angoulême, let's talk about European comics kind of episode, and you talked about it, and then almost immediately I got a message from Rich saying, right, we need to talk about this on the NIA. And I thought, perfect opportunity. So I sent away for it, and I thought it'd be good if all 3 of us chatted about it. But yeah. Now I'm going to posit this theory that having, and I base this on the fact that having been to Angoulême earlier this year, there's I call them the steps from hell. Because Angoulême's like, have you been there, Rich? By the way, have you been to Angoulême?
No, I've never been. I'd like to go.
Yeah, man, I think you'd love it. But do you speak French, by the way? Do you read French?
No. I'd be like, I'd be buying books, just to look at the pictures and just to stroke the books gently.
That's what I do. Yeah, exactly what I do. Yeah, although by the time next year rolls around, there'll be an app on our phones. We can just hold it over the page, won't there? There's going to be. But there's these terrible steps. Everyone stays in the sort of lower town, and then it's because it's a fort town. You have to walk up these terrible steps. It's like 400 steps to get to the top of it. And when you get to the top of the steps, there's a big mural on a wall, and it contains, I'm going to say, what I'm calling the big 3. So Hergé and Asterisk, I kind of think are drawn for number 1. I know we've talked about Asterisk before, Rich, haven't we? Yeah. And I would put Blake and Mortimer as, from my experiences at that sort of festival and in sort of French bookshops and stuff, as the 3rd one, with a possible contender being Spirou, which is more of a kid's comic than an all ages comic, which I think that Blake and Mortimer is. But it's very beloved in France and Belgium, isn't it? You think?
Yeah, I've got my brother-in-law. He used to work in Paris for a while, and when he left, his colleagues, they gave him like an Edgar Jacob sort of modern reproduction, sort of sketchbook of Blake and Mortimer.
Okay. Oh, nice.
He's not at all. It's just completely wasted on in his present. But presumably they thought, but it's these English guys, you'll love this. He sort of smiled sweetly and said, "Thank you very much," and put it in his bag, and has never looked at it since. But when I discovered, I was like, "Where did you get this? This looks really good." I got it from some. Well, obviously you would get it from some French people because they go, "Well, this is brilliant. You'll love it."
Yeah. And in fact, the cover of the Yellow M, which I think was the one we've all got, has got the 2 sort of standing in front of the titular M on the wall. That stance that they've got there, one with his fist in the air, the other one like about to pull something out of his pocket, is the kind of the stance you see on a lot of sort of flyers and history books. And is often used as almost like a corner box for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I think the other one I've seen quite regularly is one of them sort of like pointing to the sky.
Yes, I know the one. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, is that Yeah, I've seen that one.
So they're very iconic in France and Belgium. You know, but they just don't seem to be something that translated over here as warm. You know, weren't accepted as warmly as Asterix and Hergé and Tintin rather. But this is definitely to me a little further behind, but kind of the third collection.
I agree with that. There is do you think part of that is due to how these books are written? And I'm trying to.
Yeah, that was where I was going with that, man. Yeah, I was going to ask you about this. Yeah.
Oh, apologies, sorry, I didn't want to.
No, you're not. No, perfect. Do you? Bear in mind, you're the youngest amongst us, apart from me, Tom. How did you find them? Do you find them dated at all?
Yes, but not in a way that was an issue.
Right.
In the same way that, like watching an old Doctor Who or watching an older piece of media.
Right.
It's obviously of its time, and it's incredibly. It's quite a full book, but I had no problem reading it or understanding it, or even like getting what was guessing the message it was trying to sell.
Yeah, like maybe watching the Dam Busters or something like that. You know, it's
perfect. Perfect. Yeah, perfect. Absolutely spot on.
What about? I know you're a fan of this sort of era of the Eagle and all that sort of thing, Rich. Yeah. Can you see it for what it is? Do you think it's dated, or does it just read as just the next book on the shelf for you? Or
I mean, I think in terms of some of it is very densely written. I've heard you talk on the ACP about if you want to write a comic, it's good if you can practice being a letterer, because then you'll work out how many words you can get in a speech balloon.
Right.
And then write a comic, you'll think, oh yeah, but you can only get 20 words in a speech balloon. Therefore, I have to really hack at this, because I can only get 20 words for each character to say. And that's a good discipline. And I know you read a lot more Marvel and DC than we do, and it can take you 5 minutes to read a comic. And that's not because you're reading it really fast. It's
there's not many words. Yeah.
There's not words. So we're at real. I think we're at this real one end of the spectrum of there's almost nothing to read. There's very few words, and this sits at the other end of the spectrum, where this will take you. You can't just think, I've got an hour. I'll just read this 6 pages. It's like no, hang on. There's a lot going on. There's a lot being explained a lot of the time, and that's fine. I think I know we've swapped some images on the WhatsApp before. I
think you found the panel with the most words in I've ever seen in my life. Yeah.
And it's not like a really big. It's not like a really big panel. It's like that's okay, that size panel, but it's just it's like I don't know, 200. It looks like it's about 200 words.
Yeah, it does. Like an essay, part of an essay in this panel. Yeah.
I'll see.
Really, sorry, go on, Tom.
No, please go on.
No, I was just saying that I think I think again we mentioned it beforehand that actually that to me actually highlights why Asterix and Tintin sit above it, because actually for them you haven't got 200 words in a panel. It's actually that the genius is the hacking, is the making it. You've got 20 or 30 in a panel, and yet you're still moving the story forward, and you're bringing people with you, and everybody knows what is going on. This is why it's not quite in that absolute world class level. Although we'll get onto Edgar Jacobs working with Hergé.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was just thinking of myself actually. Yeah. I mean, one of the main complaints because I went through I did something you'd like to do, Tom, is I went through the Amazon reviews on this, and complaints about exposition seems to be a regular complaint on there. They do explain fucking everything, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
There's no. Yeah, you're very clear what the story is. I was going to say one thing that sort of struck me as this is maybe my second or third read through of this. A lot of people have the same voice.
Yeah.
And there are different characters, and but they had a lot of them speak exactly the same way from panel to panel. And you can read and be like, there's no changing in sentence structure or language use or anything at all. Sometimes you just go like, actually, there is, as Rich has quite eloquently put, like the hacking of it is a good edit. It really help this along, frankly.
I compared it to. Do you remember those Rupert annuals that would be a picture and underneath would be like a little page of a book almost? So there was no word balloons, but it was all written underneath it. I felt on occasion it was a bit like that, you know. Or as I made a joke, there's one panel that I think is Mortimer explaining something to Blake for literally about 200 words, and then Blake just says, "I see." And
I've just got to that page. I've just opened that page.
It reminds me of my life at home, gentlemen. I'll tell you that now.
I think what you said about them having a similar voice, I think it's probably also a function of the fact that all the characters are very similar. You know, it's definitely a product of its age in terms of, you know, they're all, you know, middle class, upper class, white men saving the empire. You know, there's not a big role in here for, you know, women or people of color or, you know, anything like that. You know, all the characters are very very
well, let's pick out a couple of the characters. So let's talk a little bit about who we've got in it. So Captain Francis Blake is the sort of more military Douglas Fairbanks Jr. kind of character in this. Head of MI5, obviously did a lot, you know, won a lot of medals in the Second World War and stuff like that. And he's more of the sort of action character. He's based on Jacques Londet, who is also a comics artist and an old schoolmate of Jacob's as well. So he's the sort of mustachio character. His sidekick is Professor Philip Mortimer, who is Scottish. He based him on his friend Jacques van Melkebeek, who is also another Belgian comic artist who he met at art school. Now, he has a little bit of a sort of extended cast around him because he's got a manservant called Nazir, who I'm going to say, I think there's a sort of empire, because I know Nazir disappears later on in the later issues, doesn't he? I think there was a sort of conscious effort to move away from the British Empire feel of it, as I understand it. But he's a sort of he's a aka Lieutenant Nazir. He's a kind of almost like a stand-in for Blake at times. You know, he has to sort of throw himself into action a bit, I think. And the classic housekeeper, Mrs. Benson, who
yeah. She could be called Mrs. Hudson in a different genre.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Yeah. They have. It's hard to talk about this one, isn't it? Because I don't want to spoil. Because it's a big mystery, isn't it? This one.
I'd say, you know, in terms of, you know, I'd read it, you know, ages and ages ago, years and years ago, and then when I was reading it again, I was like, you know, I don't remember what the answer to this mystery is.
Yeah.
And it is serious, and you know, it does take a long time for it to be sort of revealed, you know, precisely what is going on, you know, despite all the exposition. So I did find it mysterious. Like, oh, he's done that. Oh, you know, he has, you know, like it says on the back of the book, you know, he has taunted Scotland Yard, and he's done it again, and he's done it, and people keep getting kidnapped, and they can't stop it, and you know, they're very powerless for a long portion of this book, actually.
Yeah, they are, and it does keep you guessing because the character, you know, the yellow M, the sort of hooded, he looks a bit like the Shadow, you know, with goggles on.
Yeah, do you know? He reminds me of Lobster Johnson.
Yes, I get that with a floppy hat on. Yeah, definitely. He's seemingly bulletproof for a big chunk of it, which is recreated very well there's a cartoon that came many years later. That's recreated very well in the cartoon, although the cartoon's sort of slightly old school animation. It comes across quite well in that. So you do think, how the fuck is he not getting shot? You know, how is he doing this and doing that, and you know, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I was at a slight disadvantage by having read this as the first volume, because the mystery does involve you having pre-knowledge of the series, doesn't it?
Yes. No, same here, frankly. When those reveals, you go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
There's no big sort of, I can imagine it'd be more of a, oh, wow, it's this person. You go, okay.
Yeah. And they actually, have you got to the volume where they return to him later on, and he's almost suffering PTSD because of what's happened to him in this issue? Rich, have you got to that one yet?
Oh, not recently, no. But I've got quite a few of these on my shelf, so it'll be in the mix somewhere. But then, like I say, because these are Cinebook reprints, they're not in order anyway. So
yeah,
I would have read this, and like you say, for the big reveal, because for most of us, it's the volume 1. It's not such a big reveal. Whereas if you were reading them in numerical order, then it would be a da, da, da.
Yes.
I wasn't expecting that. Whereas
I wouldn't expect him back again. Yeah, exactly.
That bit for us is completely okay, if you say it's that person, then it's that
Yep.
person. So that's But anyway, we've talked about why this one is a reason one to start with in terms of art quality, but in terms of the big plot twist, it doesn't pack the punch that it would do if you were reading it.
As I understand it, it's quite widely held to be one of the best ones in the early run, isn't it? Which I think I can see why they went with that. As the first one, it's a nice one-off as well. You don't have to buy 2 issues and stuff like that.
No.
Let's talk a little bit. Go on, mate. Sorry.
I was going to say, ignoring that mystery. Ignoring that plot twist.
Yeah.
Just with like a simple yes/no, was it a satisfying mystery and conclusion?
Yes, it was for me. I think it was, and I think that's what stopped it being, at times, slightly a drudge, because you were having to read everything to work out the mystery. Put it that way. Yeah. What about you, Rich?
Yes, although I found the thing about the book, how they rushed up the book mysteriously at the end, annoying, because I was like, whoa, hang on. The whole thing revolves around finding a copy of a book, and then they just sort of go, oh, the only copy in existence in the British Library has been stolen. Dang. and then some old geezer sort of says, oh, well, we've had a look for, almost, just sort of behind the sofa. And would you believe it? There was a copy there. And it's like, wait, what? I think they painted themselves into a bit of a corner, or Jacob's painted himself into too much of a corner.
Yeah.
We need a book, and yet there are no copies of this book. I'll just have to magic one up. Anyway, that plot, whatever the opposite of plot twist is, plot, disaster area. Yes, I did find it. Like I say, you do have to pay attention. You do have to read it, even though there is, a lot to read to work out what is going on, because you think, hey, hang on, this geezer's getting shot. What the hell is going on? What? Dying? No, he's not Batman. What is going on?
Yeah, and I have to say that whilst there is an awful lot of exposition and an awful lot of words, which sometimes it is a bit of a trek to get through, there is some really exciting chase sequences in it, aren't there? Which I think work really well.
That's about 15 pages, that main chase sequence.
Doesn't it?
Some of the detail, they're having for anyone who isn't reading along at home, they have this extended chase sequence through Limehouse Docks.
Right, cool. Where MCM is now. There you go.
And it goes, I wrote it down there. The chase sequence essentially goes from page 36 to page 50. So it's about 15 pages. It's only 66 pages all in for this book. So it's about a quarter of the book is, this chase sequence.
And that's no short, because these pages have regularly got 10 panels a page. It's not... it's not a sort of 3-panel a page book. This is sort of 2000 AD, BD album size. So
While you mention panels, it's one thing that I really love about this volume. So many different panel layouts.
Okay, interesting.
It's lovely, right? It's you sort of flip to a page, and every page has a different panel layout, and it's not just there's no 9-panel grids. It's not just this. I love Kurgan. I love his his pages of panels, but every single page has a different combination of 7 panels, man. And do you know what I mean? It's just really nice to see a different, and they're all, there's no breakout panels either. They're all contained. There's gutters as well, contained in the boxes. Yeah. Just a lovely little touch that I was all reading through, and I was like, and I knew I was reading all the time. There was no.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it guides the eye perfectly, doesn't it?
Oh,
yeah,
it really does. It's a lovely little thing about this book that I just really enjoy about its cartooning.
Yeah. We're going to talk a little bit about Jacobs in a minute. I just want to mention a couple of things around the dialogue, and I know we've hackneyed on about we've gone on about the verbosity in it, but there are a couple that just made me laugh out loud. So the villain in it, who I won't ruin because he's one of 4 that you kind of see at the start, you think, it's got to be one of these 4 people. He goes on this panel after panel after panel of classic villain explaining why he hates the world and what he's doing. And then Mortimer goes, why? And then he says his name. You're completely mad. And that's his only comment. And I think, that's fucking great. I love that. Yeah. And he's a bit like that, isn't he, Mortimer? He's kind of gruff and to the point a lot of the time. He doesn't fuck around. For a sort of a scientist, he's quite happy to pull a gun out and stuff. But and then the other bit I wanted to mention was the last spoken words in the book are, God save the Queen. So how good is that? I love that. Especially this is written by somebody from Belgium.
Yes.
Which I don't know, I can't. And we kind of, it's kind of inbuilt for us all who've, had French pen pals or, exchange students or, been to France. The French aren't that fond of us, let's face it. I know this is Belgian, but to have the last line is God save the Queen, it did have me chuckling. And it's not even just said by one person, it's said by 3 people.
Yeah.
It's,
aren't they?
I think there's a couple of panels, and that's one of them where it does feel like a parody of what they think the English are doing. Like,
Yeah.
Every time something goes well, we'll just say "God save the Queen," just to all kings, which is
Well,
just
that was going to be my later questions, but I think I'll pose it now. To you guys, is this a satire? Are we that? Am I just being cynical? I don't know.
I think it's using a caricature of a setting.
Using a cliche, maybe, yeah.
Using a cliche of a setting to set a story. I'm not sure if it's a satire, but it could just be like, this is a really strong setting for it to be. It's a very easy shorthand. They can, he doesn't have to worry about drawing particular buildings. He can make everything a bit grey and grim.
Yeah.
And it sets it very easily. I'm not sure if maybe that does make it a satire. I don't know. But
there's certainly a lashings of ginger beer kind of feel to it, isn't it? A sort of jolly. What do you think, Rich? You've been gone a bit quiet there, man. I wonder what you thought.
I was thinking, Jacobs worked extensively with Hergé on Tintin, who is, obviously, Boy Scout detective. So actually, this is, but then he falls out with Hergé, and that's in sort of, I think the late 1940s. I think they fall out. Jacobs seeks sort of essentially not co-creator status, but he wanted
credit, didn't he, on it? Yeah,
he wanted credit.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be Hergé's Adventures of Tintin. It would be Hergé and Jacobs' Adventures of Tintin. That's the level he was working at on Tintin.
Yeah.
So this is just removed enough. It's still a detective story, which obviously sounds is his thing. But it's obviously it's these two sort of middle-aged guys rather than a young Belgian Boy Scout running around. So I think it's
just fun. Do you think?
Yeah, I think it's in keeping with with what he knows. The sort of the multi-volume arc approach, which Jacobs works on in some of the sort of the absolute finest Tintin volumes, which without it would be very different. And he continues that multi-volume here with Mystery of the Great Pyramid is 2 volumes, Secret of the Swordfish is 3 volumes. So he likes these big long stories that you can really get your teeth into, and so I think it works very well.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about himself, and then we'll get in a bit. We'll talk a bit more about the Hergé ups and downs, let's call it. So Edgar P. Jacobs, born the 30th of March 1904 in Brussels. He died in 1987. Went to the Royal Academy of Art in Brussels, aka Edgar Felix Pierre Jacobs. As you said, Rich, he only completed 11 of the Blake and Mortimers. One was half completed, half finished, and then that was later finished after he died. He started off as, believe it or not, a baritone singer and wanted to be an opera singer, and he worked in the theatre. But he was a talented artist and started with illustrations in a very popular magazine called Bravo in Belgium, in Brussels, with a 300,000 circulation. But then, interestingly, so you got to remember this is wartime. Flash Gordon was banned by the Germans in World War II, and Jacobs was employed to finish the story to give readers a proper ending. So whilst they couldn't get the story in, he had to recreate an ending to it, which led him to make something called Le Rayon U, the U-Ray, which is, if you've seen, have either of you seen any of it?
No, I haven't. But it sounds like...
Many books have reprinted it, but it's out of stock.
Oh no! Okay. Right. It really does look like Flash Gordon. It's got that real golden age look to it, And as now, there's 2 different versions of this story that I've read in separate places. He basically lucks into meeting Hergé. Now, if you read one report, it says while working as a stage painter for an adaptation of Cigars of the Pharaoh, a Tintin story. In the theatre, he met Hergé, and they became friends. But there's also a claim in another account I read that I think it's on the Lambeck website that claims they met through a mutual friend who is this aforementioned Jacques van Melkebeek. And what happened was Hergé employed him to recolour and rework some of the already released Hergé comics. So there were kind of the original Hergé Tintin, and then they were redrawn and certainly recoloured. And I'm going to say it's Tintin in the Congo, Tintin in America, and the Blue Lotus, and a couple of others. Is that right, Rich? I think I'm right on that, am I? Do you know?
Yeah, they work on some of them during. I mean, what gets them into a lot of trouble is that they stay in Belgium,
Right.
During the war, and I think Hergé has that sort of, is after the war is painted as a collaborator because he's he's stayed and he carried on working. Some of the work he does with Jacobs there is recolouring these strips for the post-war period, for sort of when happier times come around. So they sort of building up a stock of material for when the Germans aren't there. But obviously they are there, and they work on The Secret of the Unicorn, Red Rackham's Treasure, which many people would rate as probably the best Tintin stories. Okay. And they also work on The Seven Crystal Balls and Prisoners of the Sun, which again, so it's another sort of 2-volume epic. Yeah. Again, highly regarded, incredible levels of detail.
Because as I understand it, Jacobs went from assisting on the colour to assisting in the drawing of them as well. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Because I think some of those, so like Tintin in the Congo is a very early sort of, probably early 30s, is it?
Okay.
Story. So which appears originally drawn by Hergé in Le Petit 20e, but then is redrawn into the sort of the classic album format that we'd recognise. And Jacobs works with him on those, and up to the point, like I say, that he seeks essentially that sort of not co-creator, but he wants that he wants billing, he wants it to be Ed Jacobs and Hergé. And Hergé's not having it, frankly.
Yeah, he wouldn't. He was let's call him a complicated character, I think, Hergé, wasn't he? I think from all the accounts I've read. But they were very much in each other's pockets. They were very much like, big friends. And if you read some accounts, Jacobs appears in the volume. He actually has cameo roles in some Tintin stories. He's Jacobini, who in The Calculus Affair, who's an opera singer, so playing on his sort of opera background. And there's also a suggestion I read, and I'm not sure how true this is. I can't for the life of me remember what it was, but I think it might be the Lambeck site that said that Jacobs was part of the inspiration for Captain Haddock as well.
I read the same thing, frankly.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Now. Blake and Mortimer first appeared in Tintin. For those that don't know, Tintin was actually a sort of anthology magazine, not unlike something like 2000 AD that ran for a long time in France. And Blake and Mortimer first appeared in that. So they were very much friends, collaborators, and business partners throughout this period. As I understand it, they did have this falling out, but after a few years, the ice sort of melted a bit, as I understand, and they did become friendly again. But like I said the minute ago, as I understand it, Hergé wasn't an easy bloke to get along with, I think, on occasion. He wrote an autobiography in 1973 called Un Opera de Papier, Les Memoirs de Blake and Mortimer, which I haven't found in English yet, or I'd love to read it if it was translated. He ran the Grand Prix of Saint-Michel in Belgium in 1971. He was known as a perfectionist by all accounts, and he would research elements of his comics in intricate detail, which may explain the lack of releases for someone, when you've got his contemporaries would perhaps be releasing a lot more albums than him, and he only managed 11 and a half. But he was known for scrapping whole ideas and going back and restarting, as he was with Pages, I think. You can find some of his work. Occasionally it pops up on Heritage and stuff like that, the OA for his work. Obviously out of mine and yours reach, Tom, but probably Rich could manage it, I think, probably. Good. Yeah, a really interesting bloke, Rich. I don't know if you've looked much into him, but he looks like a character from his comics to me when you see a picture of him,
Yeah, he looks like a cross between Blake and Mortimer.
He does. Yes, he does. Yeah. Cool. Right, guys, what about any other little sections of it that you really liked? Should we come to you, Rich, first? Anything that you really you wanted to highlight and say, well, I really enjoyed this section or that section or this panel or that panel,
Well, I think we talked about the
extended chase. Yeah.
So some of that. I mean, you mentioned just there about the sort of the incredible sort of precision and detail. Which you would see in a Tintin book as well. Hergé, he would go to actual places and draw actual buildings to go, right, this is supposed to be a lake house in Geneva. Right, we're off to Geneva this afternoon. Back on Friday, cancel the milk sort of thing, and they would go off and they would find, partly I guess, because he's got loads of money, so he's like, of course we can go to Geneva for a few days just to draw, a building. They didn't have Google Image. He's like, right, well, I'm just going to look at this house in Geneva.
Yeah.
So he had precision and detail, which certainly appears, in the dock scenes. There's this whole sequence where there's a whole page 41 in the scene book where there's an enormous sort of crane that this chase takes place on. That's incredible. But think back to one of the things Tom mentioned about actually in volume 6 there aren't any large sort of splash pages, but in some of the earlier volumes like the Great Pyramid, Secret of the Swordfish, they've taken some of those splash pages which I guess appeared in the magazine when it came out, and you do get these whole pages of these huge big single page.
Interesting. Okay.
They've gone by the time you get here, so maybe it's just sort of maybe this wasn't serialized in quite the same way. And which means that things like there's a train crash, which I know we've talked about off air before we came here, which is very dramatic, and it's a very two trains running into the back of each other, but it occupies about 20% of the page. If it's the whole page, you could well believe it because you'd want that very dramatic image.
Oh man, I'm not even saying a whole page these days. If this was an image book, that would be a whole issue of that fucking train crashing. Can
I pick up on that?
Of course, man.
Because we obviously talked about how this is, I don't want to say ponderous, but it's quite a heavy book. It's got a lot of text in there. But that train sequence happens over 2 pages. It's 20 panels, and a train is introduced and crashed within those 2 pages.
Convincingly, utterly convincing. As well.
It doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel like, but the story is simultaneously slow and fast paced at the same time. Yeah. Like if someone came to you with a pitch to it was like, hey, okay, over these 2 pages, we're going to get on this train, we're also going to crash it as well. You're like, hold on, let's give a bit of time here, right?
And don't forget, you've got to get someone kidnapped in the middle of those 2 pages as well. Yeah.
It's should we get the trolley involved? Should we have to go to the toilet? Or that? No, we're just going to get the train in. We're going to have the threat set up. We're going to have them kidnapped. We're going to have the train crash. It's going to look convincing. But we're also going to put a ton of text in there as well. It's a simultaneously slow and fast-paced comic, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you guys. When I started reading this, I found it a chore. I'll be honest with you. I think it was when I reached the train crash, I was then suddenly fucking in it. You know what I mean? It's a little bit when you're used to reading, the average comic that comes out these days, mostly American comics. You're not used to this much text. You're not used to spending this much time on a page. But I was finding it a bit laborious, a bit of a chore, as I said. But when I got to the train page, I thought it suddenly clicked. I thought this geezer knows exactly what he's doing. I'm fucking along for the ride now. And that's page 23. It took a while to get there. I will be honest, but yeah, that's when it got me. I think. Yeah.
I mean, I'll hold my hands up. I read a lot of manga, right?
Yeah.
And this is a whole different...
Which is the opposite, the complete opposite end, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can, it would... but it's still, it's a really fun read. It's a really fun read. I think the train crashes, for such a small part of the book, is a really, really lovely bit, but also just towards the end where the plan is unveiled, should we say.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, go on, sorry.
I was going to say, you know my hatred for cosplayers, Tom. I don't want next time I meet you, I don't want you cosplaying as Blake. I'll tell you now. Because I can see you with that moustache, my friend.
Yeah, you're right. It's a good point. It's a very good point. I'm pretty close. No, there's just some... Yeah, I don't want to say... no, I don't want to give that away. That's the problem. And if there's anything you're going to take away from this, so the fact that we're all dancing around the
mystery. Yeah.
Yeah, there's clearly... If I didn't care about the book, I would just say, it's X.
But comics are very rarely a convincing mystery. There's very few out there that kept you guessing. The obvious one is Watchmen, isn't it? Watchmen is basically a mystery. This one kept me guessing more than that, I think. It's got that Agatha Christie feel to it, isn't it, in a way?
Yeah, agreed. Completely agree.
What about any moments that you really liked, Simon? Anything you wanted to mention?
Oh, I mean, so I was going to go through the train.
Oh, okay, right.
But you know what? Just generally, the fact that the growing tension of the yellow mark.
Yeah.
Like the how it turns up. I mean, the first robbery is the crown jewels, right? And that's a little bit twee, a little bit, but from that point onwards, there's this really nice growing threat of the yellow mark and them always being 2 steps ahead. And I've read that sort of just slow paced, but also fast paced storytelling. I really enjoyed.
Yeah, and for those that haven't read it, they leave this M with a circle around it after a crime. So you see that before you see this villainous shadow character, and before you see his mastermind. And at one point, there's a really lovely, well done bit where they're on a tram car, and this is well done in the cartoon actually, where they're looking around, and Mortimer says to Blake, "He's drawn it on your back. How'd he get there?" You know, that's really nicely done. I thought really well done that. Yeah,
and it's just a nice calling card that's all like, you might not see it for 3 or 4 pages, but then it'll come up and you'll be like, oh, okay, and it just keeps up the tension like a really nice way. Yeah, and it's the aspect of so if we go to American comics like the Riddler, for example. The thing I always enjoyed about the Riddler was he'd already worked out how Batman was going to solve the case, and then has put clues in his way. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So you feel like you have this villain who's always 1 step ahead, and you have a real strong.
It's a calling card like the Riddler has.
Exactly. Exactly. And just something about that I really enjoyed. That part I really enjoyed.
Yeah, good. I'm going to pick one bit. I'm going to pick the villain who we're not naming, the mastermind, when he has that sort of hypno hat on.
Yes.
I really like that bit.
Yeah, it is good. It is very good.
Who's the Marvel villain, the Ringmaster? He has a similar hat, doesn't he? You going to say something, Rich?
Oh, sorry. You fancy one of those hats in your life, Tony? That would.
Well, imagine the ladies I'd get with that hat, my friend. Or gentlemen, you know. He's obviously, yeah. I think that works out, and it works, and he draws it so well as well. You know, it just you almost feel like you're getting a bit drawn into it as he draws it. But yeah, I can only imagine that Stan might have seen that on a hat. And included it in the Ringmaster in Marvel. But yeah, very good. Let's talk a little bit about where it went next. So, as you said, Rich, it got taken over, didn't it, by some other people? After many years, I think there was a big jump, wasn't there? He died in, I think, was it 87? And it didn't really restart again for a number of years, did it, I think?
Yeah, I think they've got, is it Van Ham?
Yeah,
who has done,
very well recognised writer, isn't he, in France?
Yeah. Did he do stuff on 13? Is that right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I think actually they've been through a number of creative partnerships since then. So, you know, it is definitely into that, in a way, I suppose something like Asterix has these days as well. We've gone from having 2 creators to 1 creator to now we're on completely new blood, which I think tells you how either valuable the French publishers think the IP is, and probably what the demand is in France for this series, that they do want to keep creating these volumes and keep these characters out there.
Yeah, as I understand it, they used a lot of Jacob's notes and letters that he wrote to get ideas from. They weren't necessarily complete outlines or stories or anything like that, but they used a lot of his ideas in it. And there's been a couple of little twists on the story. So as we said, in 1997, Jean Van Ham and Ted Benoit were given permission finally to restart the franchise. But in 98, there's Blake and Mortimer, L'Aventure Immobile by Didier Conrad and André Julliard. And it features an exchange of letters between Blake and Mortimer, which I found quite an interesting thing. Mm-hmm. Almost like the later years, this sort of thing going on. And then in 2019, novelist Thomas Gunzig and filmmaker Jacques Van Dormiel, with art by Francois Chouten, did Le Dernier Pharaoh, the story of Blake and Mortimer when they were elderly. And it's apparently that was a massive seller, and that was based on Jacob's notes. But it's almost like Blake and Mortimer, the wilderness years, old man Blake and Mortimer. It's got that feel about it, which I really want to read now.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. That sounds really interesting, actually. That kind of, because again, we're seeing them in their prime here. Or Right for
oh yeah, we are, aren't we? Kind of, yeah. I mean, Heroes were like that, weren't they? In the pages of the Eagle and Saturday morning, stories and black and white movies. They were, they weren't all youngsters back then. There's been a couple of other versions, let's call it that. So the Time Trap was made into a radio play in 1962. In 1997, we got the cartoon, which 26 episodes, 13 stories, 4 of which were newly written for the cartoon. But I know we've all watched the Yellow M episode, and it's fairly like the book, isn't it? They don't really wander about too much.
Pretty close. It's pretty close. Yeah, it's what? It's if you're uncertain about whether you wanted to read this, that's an easy way to see if this is your cup of tea.
I think so. Yeah, very much. It feels it, doesn't it? And it's quite nice to hear Mortimer's voice somehow. I don't know why. I just
no, I agree. I thought exactly the same thing, frankly.
Yeah.
Well, exactly the same thing. Yeah.
There's never been a film of it, although they've tried a few times. In 2010, there were 2 actors were rumoured to be involved in it. Rich and Tom, can you guess who they were?
Ooh.
Quite a strange mixture. I don't quite know if this is right.
What year was this? Obviously, I can do the joke, Jason Momoa and The Rock. But I'm assuming it's a bit
yeah. Ice-T and
Will Smith.
Take that out of your mouth.
Hugh Grant.
Do you know what? You're not far off. It's Hugh Laurie was one of them.
Hugh Laurie.
And he was going to play Blake, according to this report I read. And Kiefer Sutherland was going to play Mortimer.
Oh, God, okay.
Bear in mind, Kiefer had just come off the back of the 24 at that point. You think, what's that all about? But
you could have gone the Fry and Laurie combination again.
You could have done, couldn't you? Yeah, perfect.
It would have been too far off the mark, frankly.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, according to John Van Ham, there's a 3-minute version was filmed as a trial for that, but it's never been seen otherwise.
Sure.
There's a tabletop game by Yastari Games in 2014, and Dargard and Anuman Interactive did another game in 2011. There's this very prominent mural on Glem, as there are elsewhere. So there's been a number of parodies done of it, as you can imagine. It's very parodiable. I think if France had their version of the comic strip Presents, I think they probably would have parodied it, wouldn't they? Like we had the 5 Go Mad in Dorset. I think this would probably be.
Yes.
Belgian electronica band Telex had a song called Colonel Orlick, ha ha ha. Colonel Orlick being one of the regular villains in it, on an album called Neurovision. Go look that up on Spotify. I did, and it's not there. You have to find it elsewhere. I know you're big into prog, Rich. There's a prog band called Magma. I don't know if that's true or not. I just said that for a joke. I don't know. Are you into prog? I don't know.
No.
I quite like prog.
Okay, cool, fine. Yeah. And they've named an album called Konast Kos, which is a villain, apparently, in the series. And in volume 22, Orlick deals... I can't say it now, can I? Orlick deals with some experiences he's had with Blake and Mortimer, which is almost like a villain looking back on his life as a villain, which also sounds like a book I really want to read as well.
Yeah, do you know, I know the one you were talking about, and I also wanted to read that as well.
Yeah.
Because following it, there's a lovely sort of big page of all the volumes on there, and I was in front, I was like, oh, there's this one. I wonder, and because yes, how the story ends, you think someone's done, but yeah, no, I wanted to check that one out.
Yeah, definitely. Le Monde, which is the big French newspaper, one of the big French newspapers, listed its books of the 20th century and named number 90 as Blake and Mortimer, believe it or not. There you go.
It's definitely one of those I think would work really well as a radio play,
Yeah.
You could actually see it working as a 6-part radio play kind of thing.
Yeah, agreed, man. Yeah, I'd listen to the shit out of that. It's the sort of thing you want Big Finish to do, don't you?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And it seems like a home run, frankly. It's a decent story, worked really well for radio. Yeah.
Yeah. And a certain rather right-wing, France has some right-wing politicians and political groups. You think we've got right-wingers? We ain't compared to them, man, I've got to tell you. One political party over there has their own website, and they name French and Belgian books you should read, and Blake and Mortimer is highly recommended by a right-wing French political party. I'm not sure how it's a good thing or bad thing, but if we can get nutty right-wingers to read it, it might swerve them a bit around to being more sensible, but there you go. So on the whole, a successful and new read for me. I'm going to read some more, I think. I know, Rich, you'll have read them all by the end of the week, so there's no point asking you. But Tom, will you read some more, do you think? Or
Yeah, I'm going to go back over. I've got the Curse of the Pyramids 1 and 2. So I'm going to go over, the Mystery of the Great Pyramid, sorry. I'm going to go back over those, and then I might pop down to Excelsior and see what else they've got and stuff.
nice work. Still available, Rich, aren't I? think this series are mostly available, are they? Or do you know?
Yeah, but mostly available on Cinebook. I think some they don't have quite all of them available. Some of them have sold out. But
Right.
yeah, definitely. Mystery of the Great Pyramid. I think that the art style in there, is very similar to his. That will look like when you look at it. I think, oh, this looks like Tintin. Whereas the Yellow M, I think he's moved away from. Develops his own art style a bit more. But yeah, the Mystery of the Great Pyramid, I think that looks a lot. If you like Tintin, that's fine. But yeah, sort of 2 volumes. Yeah, Mystery of the Great Pyramid is up there with the best stories that Jacobs did for this series.
Oh, good stuff, man. Brilliant. Good. Thank you, gentlemen. That's a good one. We're just going to have a quick chat with both of you about what you got going on at the moment. So, Rich, as always, thrill of the chase, my friend. Blue Moon Comics with Steve Parkhouse and Charlie Adlard. Don't tell eBay. What was that all about?
Yeah. So yes, Blue Moon comic, short-lived series by Tim Quinn.
Okay.
And Gillian Baverstock, who was Enid Blyton's daughter.
Oh, wow.
And it was a sort of series put together looking basically at sort of retelling fairy tales or new stories with classic fairy tale characters, so cheap, out of copyright characters that you can use. Yeah, last a dozen issues. Charlie Adlard contributes to a few of those, and Steve Parkhouse, I think, contributes to all of them.
Oh, right.
Parkhouse
doesn't get enough love, man. I tell you that. Resident Alien is brilliant. He's so good in that. Yeah.
I have now finally got a full set of Blue Moon. It's been a project over a few years, as they often are, related series. But yeah, I definitely I think Mario Capaldi is in there as well, who did a lot of work sort of mid-80s comics, and John Freeman will tell you the story that when John was working for Marvel UK, he was prominent in getting artists their artwork back.
Right.
Which was not necessarily the done thing at the time. He basically got Mario Capaldi a lot of his artwork back. And then at one point I had to ring Mario Capaldi up about something or other. And Capaldi sort of answered the phone and said, "You're the man who sent me all this artwork back." Sort of filled his garage with it. He's like, "What have you done? I don't want all this stuff." And John's like, "Well, I thought I was being the good guy," which he was.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Yeah.
You try and help, but there's no helping people. So it's been good to dig into the history of a Blue Moon comic. The other
one I was going to ask you about, and this has got a Charlie Adlard link to it as well, is the X-Files comics, which were bought out by a manga company, were they? Is that right?
They were, yeah. They're called Manga Publishing,
right?
Although they're not doing manga, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
Although some are, because they had a Mortal Kombat 2 Mortal Kombat series that they ran, and they had another one as well. Yeah, so it's just part of my long look at what feels like every comic ever published in the 90s by anybody. That I feel I ought to document, because the blog is a fantastic way of doing that sort of thing, because you can make those connections. You can just give everything a what do you call it, like not a link, but a
I think the corporate memory, comics memory is a short thing these days. It used to be, there used to be a lot of people about who, could talk about, the first time such and such appeared in, DC Showcase or something. But that seems to be disappearing, and thank God for people like you do, because you're writing it all down. It's available there. It's always coming up on my research, your blog.
And it's good. And it's just brilliant having a blog for things like that, where it's just like, if you want a whole series of something, you can sort of go to the Grand Comics database, and that might have, a run of 10 or 20 things. But often, you see, one image here on Facebook, there might be one image on eBay, and it's just, there's go for all 12. So you just have to pick away at it like a scab for about, years. And by the end of it, you've got all of them. But without that, there's just nowhere obvious. Anyway, I think.
I had no idea X-Files had a comic. Not at all.
Yeah,
Not,
drawn by Adlard. Some of it, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Not a Scooby-Doo.
In fact, there was an article. It was a news item on him about him drawing it when it was coming out. It was like an interview. I think you can still find it on YouTube. Long before The Walking Dead or anyone really knew who he was. And he was sort of, there's like a video of him actually drawing it. Yeah, it's okay. It's quite readable. It's quite enjoyable. Yeah.
Well, I can't remember where else I found Adlard stuff. He did a couple of also on the blog. I think he did some comic. He did some adverts, like in the those sort of big fat sort of telephone directory sort of Great British Comic Guide sort of by Duncan, late 90s.
Yeah.
There are some adverts that he did in there for his local comic shop. So those are really early Adlard art. So yeah, I'll send you a link. It's all on the blog. But
good man. Yeah, good. No, I enjoy looking at your blog. Yeah, no, it's very good. It's a nice one to sort of pour through, and it's nicely indexed on the right hand side, isn't it? So you can find stuff when you need it and stuff.
Yeah, but it is brilliant.
And the other thing I want to mention, mate, is look at you. You're the consultant editor at Illustrator magazine now. You're just telling me.
I am the consultant, or one of the consulting editors, which
the main one. You said yes. You're the main one. Yeah.
Which wasn't a job title I gave myself. Somebody else invented that job title for me, and it does mean chief nitpicker and complaint. Really, it's just fact checking people's articles and going through and saying either I think that could be slightly better written, or actually like Jeanette Kahn, I would say. Is he a DC editor, Marvel editor, DC editor?
Editor in chief, DC.
Yeah. And just. You can spell Jeanette Kahn wrong in a lot of ways, and people do. And it's just one of those things, when you read an article, you think, you just have to think either sometimes I look at it and go, no, that's definitely wrong, or you think, that's the sort of thing that people get wrong a lot. I'll better just look it up. Right. Because often, when you're writing stuff, you can't see the wood for the trees. You just write, you need another pair of eyes to look at it and go, no, hang on, the whole story is correct, but actually you've spelled, Kahn is actually... She's not the Wrath of Khan, she's the Wrath of Jeanette Khan, and it's spelled different.
Yeah, I have to print stuff out. That's the only way I do it to spot mistakes. I actually print it out these days and read it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Oh, yeah. So I'm proofreading copies of Illustrators magazine. They've got a deal with Rebellion to republish sort of things like not Commando, but the sort of the south of the border equivalent of Commando, like War Picture Library, Thriller Picture Library. They're going to bring out dozens of volumes of that, and I've proofread one volume of that, and a few arrived very kindly in the post to me this week. And I'd ordered Brian Bolland's new book, and they sent me a few other freebies as well as a thank you.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah,
that was very nice. So so it's it's a good project to be involved in. They're
quite right too, man. Yeah, you're the one to go to, I think. Yeah, a good choice. Good stuff, man. Nice work. And what about you, Tommy Guns? You got tomorrow night. You're looking after us at the Drink and Draw, aren't you? That's tomorrow already. Now.
I feel it's more like you're all looking after me, Frank. It's all like a joke. So I've got Drink and Draw tomorrow, which is. Do you know what? I need to get back to doing that more regularly, frankly.
People enjoy it, don't they? It's just sort of.
They do enjoy it, and it's not so much hard work to put on, and I'm going to make more of an effort to make sure that's on regularly, frankly, and that's a more regular schedule for it. I've got a few bits and pieces I'm working on, not particularly comic related, but just a few bits and pieces in the background, and just trying to get through this crazy life, trying to put the scales in the right position,
Yeah, and cosplaying as David Seaman dressed in a Star Trek uniform, as it looked like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He's a premier English goalkeeper.
He's a hair legend of yours, isn't he?
That's what I'm aiming for, frankly.
I used to have a ponytail. Terrible, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, what an image.
Rich, have you ever had a ponytail, Rich?
No, mate. No.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, you will now.
No, that ship has sailed, I have to say. I should have done it when I had the chance, but no, I'm not as
when the kids are grown up and they've left for university and you've retired and you're on your pension and you're researching some 90s comics, I can see you as like, you got one of those pullovers on and long hair sitting there reading.
Little cigarillo.
Yeah.
Smoking a pipe. Yeah.
Good stuff. So, Rich, where can we find you, mate, and where can we find your brilliant blog?
you can find my blog at boysadventurecomics.blogspot.com, which has nearly 2,500 posts on there now.
Ooh.
I think by the end of April we'll have hit 2,500. So yeah, I've been doing it every day for 6.5 years.
Top work. Very good.
And anymore, I've got in a good place with it now in terms of I've got like a big
buffer sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, the opposite of backlog. Yeah, I've got like 60 posts ready to go. So It doesn't, sometimes you sort of think, oh Christ, I need to go on a summer holiday. Oh my God, what am I going to do for 2 weeks? But I'm like, no. I've got a big buffer of stuff ready to go. And I just find it endlessly fascinating. Today I was looking at something and I thought, I didn't know that existed. Oh, I could link that with that, and I could link that with that. Oh yeah, that would be interesting. So it keeps me interested. Look out. Like I said, by the end of April, we'll have hit 2,500 posts. So look out for that. Or you can follow me on the evil Twitter at Rich and Sheaf.
Good work, mate. And what about you, Mr. Tom? Where can we find you?
Gosh, I've been hanging out more on the ACP Slack more than anywhere else, frankly.
Yeah, we had a chat about this today, didn't we? It's a much friendlier and nicer and satisfying read.
Yeah, I just prefer it generally. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, go for this chucklehead. But I'd rather see you on the Slack, frankly.
Good stuff. Yeah, and before we go, I just want to give a little shout out to Rob Hardingham, who I met up with last Monday, and he very kindly gifted me a spinner rack. So I have a spinner rack now. There's no pornography in it so far. I have a spinner rack in my office, which people comment on when I Teams message them and stuff these days. So yeah, I'm quite proud of that. So thanks for that, Rob. Big shout out to Rob. Thanks, guys. A brilliant subject, a really different one as well. So thanks for that, and we'll keep talking, but we'll say goodbye to everyone else right now. Cheers, guys.